Marie Berry, who is the former EPA director for the Washoe Tribe for many years while they worked through the designation of the Leviathan Mine. It's a Superfund site on Washoe land. She was brought to us by our board member, Tim Seward, who was an attorney that worked with the Washoe Tribe as the Leviathan Mine was being understood as the Superfund site, and walking through that whole process. Marie's going to tell us a little bit about that because, of course, what's happening in the third world, all over the world today for gold mining, happened right here. The exact same thing. People walked into the town, into the village. Either everyone was killed or ordered into the mine. Marie Berry.
I worked for the Washoe Tribe in Nevada and California for the last 15 years until last January. I started there in 1999 and worked on Leviathan Fund. It was put into a Superfund in 2000, and Felicia Marcus is mine. She's now in charge of the California Water Control Board. But we've worked with the Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, UNR, and, well, ARCO and BP are the people that are currently up at the mine during the summer, and they do treatment on the water. Leviathan Mine is up in Alpine County, and it's close to the Carson River. It flows into the Carson River, and it was a mine that was used for, I don't know if you guys know what Anaconda Mine is, but it's in Yerington. It's a copper mine, and so they use sulfur out of the Leviathan Mine. Take over there, and they use it with their copper mine. And currently in Yerington, they're deciding to put in another big copper mine on the other side of the Walker River, which was BLM land that was transferred over to the county 2 years ago. And that mine is going to be bigger than Anaconda, and they've been trying to get Anaconda as a Superfund site for many years. When I first started working with the Washoe, I did a lot of research. I'm a Tuolumne Miwok, I'm Cherokee, and I'm Blackfoot. But I didn't get to go and do the interviews with the elders. The tribal people did from the location where they were at. But I did research, and I also went out with EPA and did macroinvertebrate surveys, water surveys, fisheries surveys, and that kind of stuff. And I worked with UNR people on some seep areas, and they were trying to plant some trees to see if any trees would come up in the mining area. California Water Quality Control Board actually bought the mining site after the mining quit. And they went up, and for many years they did water treatment, and then about 4 years ago, ARCO and BP took over. And the Washoe right now and the rest of our partners, we're in litigation. I can't really talk much about that kind of stuff. But we're in a severe drought up there right now, and we have many beaver dams going up Bryant Creek, which goes up to Leviathan Mine. And what's happening behind those beaver dams is all the sedimentation is getting caught, and none of the fish are able to go up. And the first time I went up to Leviathan Mine was in '99, and I went up with the EPA representative, and there's two big ponds. The first pond it was a rainbow color. It just looked like a rainbow. It was crazy. And there were dead animals all around it. There were dead birds, I found a dead bear, a couple of dead deer, and that kind of stuff. And then at a bigger site, the same thing. They didn't really have a fence around it, so the animals would come down, they'd drink the water, and they would die on the sides. But currently, the treatment that they're doing is cleaning the water. We've had fish starting to come up. We're seeing macroinvertebrates and dang beavers. But we've had floods over the years. It's red. We've had floods over the years where we've had excessive amount of sediment come down from the Carson River. Why is it turned red? About that. When I was working for the Washoe Tribe, I also sat on the Regional Tribal Operations Committee, which that's all Region 9 tribes from California, Arizona, and Nevada. And Nevada has a ton of mining there. There's legacy minings that just would blow your mind if you saw them. But I worked a lot with the Nevada tribes. I've worked with California tribes over by Clear Lake and some other areas. I worked for California State Parks at Malkoff in the early 90s, and I did fisheries studies there, and we did find some yellow-legged frogs in Humbug Creek, which was amazing. I grew up just above Colfax, up by Alta, and we have 4 mining shafts on my parents' property. We have 76 acres, and I always thought there was 2, but this year CAL FIRE came through and they masticated a lot through there, and we have 4. So we have no water coming out of them, so that's a good thing. But I've seen all kinds of hydraulic mining along Highway 80. As you go up towards Alta, you can see it along the roads. And the Bear River area and Yuba River area as well. So I've been around mining for quite a while. I even had a high school friend who didn't know his house was on top of a mine shaft, who he was sleeping one day and the house fell down the mine shaft and he passed away. And I couldn't believe that Placer County would allow anyone to build a house over a mine shaft. That's just unbelievable. But with I'll go back to the Leviathan mine. I've worked a lot with EPA on a lot of different things, and U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We did a lot of water sampling. We did a lot of fishery studies. There used to be Lahontan cutthroat trout that ran all the way up past Leviathan mine. And once they started mining, the LCTs stayed up, but then they got cross-pollinated. Well, rainbows came in, so they crossed. We've been trying to get Lahontan cutthroat trout back in the Truckee River, Tahoe Basin, many of the areas outside of the Tahoe Basin, and the Carson River and the Walker River. But this year, we have hardly any water in the Carson River. So we're in a major drought. And I haven't been up to the mine site yet this year, but the Forest Service has been allowing motorcycles and off-road vehicles to go through the creek. And the creek has changed so much since I was there in '99. It's just, it's blown away because of off-road vehicles. And so we've been trying to work with the Forest Service to close that area because a lot of it goes through tribal allotment lands. And so there's a lot of tribal allotment land around Leviathan Mine. And when I first got there, we not only talked to the elders, but we also put together a report on native practices that they did out there. There used to be elk out there. There used to be a lot of LCTs. People used to go camp out there, pick pinyon nuts and do all that. And they haven't been able to do that for a very long time because everything's contaminated, including the willow along the creek. So that's just been what I've done the last 15 years. But the Washoe territory is very large. It covered Lake Tahoe. And Lake Tahoe actually was logged completely for Virginia City. All the logs went down Clear Creek, which goes down through tribal land and down to the Carson River, and it went to Virginia City. And so if you go up to Tahoe, which I hope all of you guys have gone up there, but you'll see the trees, some are just the same size as the other ones, but in the higher elevations, you're gonna find bigger trees. And those are the ones they couldn't get. So that's about all I had to say.
So, Marie, I'm interested, one of the things that the Sierra Fund has been trying to work on is how to work with the tribal people of this area in terms of tribal consultation. How and where should one work with the federally recognized and also the traditional tribes of our area? Is there a proper way to approach tribal consultation?
You should have me do that because I've done it. But yeah, a lot of times when you go and meet with tribes, you have to let them speak and talk about the area and that kind of stuff, and then you can bring up some of the ideas that you have. I've been back in Oklahoma. I've talked a lot to EPA and other people about the Pebble Mine in Alaska. Been to New Mexico, seen their stuff, and a lot of times it's just easiest just to go in and introduce yourselves and have them talk about what they have up there, because there's a lot of indigenous things that they used in the past that they might be concerned about, and that's how we found a lot of the contamination.
When the Sierra Fund started our mining program, the first thing we did was hold meetings with 6 different tribal entities in the gold country of California: Shingle Springs, Oroville, Nevada City, Redding. And we learned that every tribe, one of the big aha moments for me was realizing that though they were all tribal people, they were all quite different. It's a little bit like when, if you were, let's say you wanted to understand the French, But you couldn't find any French people, and well, the Germans are right next door. I'll just have the Germans stand in for the French, because obviously they're right next door. They must know a lot about each other. Or let's take the English and the Irish, really, really close.
I'm Irish too.
Yeah, there you go. So one of the things I think that happens is that people say, oh, well, they're an Indian. They'll represent the Indian people. And I think there's quite a distinction between the Washoe, the Maidu, and the Miwok. So is there a difference in approaching Washoe versus Miwok versus Maidu, or is it just all about the listening?
Well, I grew up with a lot of the Maidu too, but I think the best thing to do is just go in and talk to them and let them talk, and then you can talk. Because we've had a lot of meetings where we've had people just come in and just like bark stuff at us, and then I'm a scientist, so it's easier for me to bark back. But tribes, they really appreciate when people come and talk to them about their traditional areas. They do.
Well, it's interesting that she started off by talking about Felicia Marcus and EPA and Water Board, because in fact, our next speaker is not Felicia Marcus, but a member of the State Water Resources Control Board alongside Felicia Marcus. Frances Spivy-Weber serves as the public member of the State Water Resources Control Board. She's the vice chair of the board and is the board liaison to the Los Angeles and San Diego and Central Coast areas and the Ocean Protection Council Steering Committee. Prior to joining the board, she was the executive director of the Mono Lake Committee and international program director of the National Audubon Society. Welcome, Franz Spivy-Weber.
Thank you.
Texas.
I am from Texas, so, but I love Chicago, so that's all right. Thank you.
Work that up next time.
Okay. My husband said I should wear a yellow rose or something if I at this talk. Thank you, Izzy, for inviting me, and thank all of you for being here tonight. It's I have to say, when I started thinking about tonight, I thought I am possibly the worst representative to be here, because I don't really know enough about mining, and in fact, the regional boards are the ones who do most of the work for the water boards on mining. But the joy of tonight is that I have learned so much, not only about the subject matter, but also about what the regional boards are doing. Let me start with who are the water boards. That's a plural. We are a multitude of issues and groups and people, and we take on trouble wherever we can find it. We are water quality, which is what gets us into mining and the devastation that can come from mining on waterways that affect health when fish bioaccumulate mercury, that can also affect environmental health. But we're also we oversee water rights issues. So all the discussion about drought and the loss of water, both for agriculture as well as for urban areas, is something that we are dealing with right this very moment. But just last July, we added the drinking water program to the State Water Board. We didn't add it, the legislature did. And we have the drinking water program in the Water Board now, and Liz Haven, who's been working a lot on that in terms of getting that integrated into the water boards, has been wonderful. And so now we have in one area water quality, drinking water, and water rights. It's really quite wonderful, and the effect is very much along the lines of the way Izzy approaches impossible problems. We are having to work together, we're having to listen, we're having to consider how we can do something that another one might not be able to, and how we can make more out of a whole than just the sum of the parts. And partners in this are not only the 9 regional boards, which are all over the state and are arranged somewhat along watershed lines, but also the drinking water regions that are all over the state and are working on drinking water. And so we are pursuing a number of very important programs and projects. And one of them is the reason you all are gathered here today, and that is mining. Now, tomorrow, you will have an opportunity to meet 2 members, one who's here tonight. Where is she? Michelle, are you still here? Ah, there you are. Michelle, stand up. She's going to be on a panel tomorrow, and she works with the Central Valley region. And I believe the panel that you are going to be on is the statewide mercury program for reservoirs, which is our big focus right now. And then Patrick Morris is also going to be here tomorrow from the Central Valley region, and he's going to be on a panel about prioritization and best available techniques. It's a track, and so he will be talking about best available techniques. And both of them are very much aware and knowledgeable, not only about what the water boards are doing, but what is happening in this whole field. I'll tell you a little bit about the reservoir program that is just getting launched. You'll hear a lot more about it tomorrow, a lot more in detail. But lest you think that we are just focused on the Sierra and the Delta, that's only a portion of the mining challenges that we've got. We've got challenges that are even further up in the Sierra, in the Lahontan region, in the area around Lake Tahoe, the Leviathan mine that you just heard about. We also have mines in the Central Coast area that are being worked on. We have mines up in the North Coast as well. So all of these are part of our effort to work on the mining issue. And the focus right now is on reservoirs. The new focus is on reservoirs. We have not stopped having our interests in upper watershed in trying to keep the mercury and the devastation from coming down the streams into the reservoirs. But we are as we continue that program, we are starting this new effort to work on reservoirs. Currently, there are 74 reservoirs identified with that are impaired for mercury, and so we will be focusing on that. We'll be doing a fair amount of study, pilot projects, not just studies, but pilot projects, things to test, are there things that we can do right now or very soon that will reduce the amount of mercury in these reservoirs so that they can be fishable, so you can possibly eat fish. Are there species of fish that would be that would take up the mercury, would be less capable of taking up the mercury as are certain fish right now. So we'll be looking at the chemistry of the reservoirs, and are there things that we can do to change the chemistry that would make them more fishable, swimmable, and more in keeping with what it is we're trying to do in the future. Because as you saw from Izzy's slides, and as you've heard from seeing the incredibly horrible slides from other parts of the world, and hearing about the mines and the effect of all this work on tribes in early lives, but also it's just continuing until today. This is a very, 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 very big problem. And so we can't just do one thing. We have to do many things, and that is going to be the focus of the boards to try to test and find those things that will make things at least somewhat better. And I want to close on on two kind of upbeat stories. One, both of them actually come from the San Francisco region, and one is on the New Almaden mining area, where they went in and they've been excavating mining waste in the stream channels, capping and vegetating the waste piles, and implementing erosion control measures throughout the park, and they are seeing some success. They saw even more success with the Gambonini mine, which was also in Tomales Bay. It was in that area. And it was I believe it was a Superfund site. Anyway, it was certainly a huge problem. And they used basically funding from the water board. This was the regional board, used funding from the water board, and with EPA, and were successful in completing emergency Superfund cleanup in just 2 years. Now, it's not some of the big pictures some of the big problems that we saw pictures of, but some of these things can be done, and they don't have to take forever. Some will take forever. And so we need to be working at both of those levels. So I want to again thank you for being here for the next 2 days, for being interested in this. And I think the key to working with the water boards, the regional boards, and the state board will be to have ideas as to what we can do to help you help your region. And I think that this is, I know you would love that if we had a silver bullet. We certainly have some gold rings in the offing, and I'm looking forward to hearing more about those. But I think we are all going to be in this together, and we cannot do it independently. We cannot do it separately. We have to do it working together. So I'm glad to be here. I'm glad to meet so many new friends, and I hope we will hear lots of good ideas coming from you over the next couple of days. Thank you.
So again, the State Water Resources Control Board is really one of the critical allies in this, and it's an interesting presentation. Greg had a question he wanted to ask you.
Okay.
Yeah, no, Fran, I mean, I think it's been, I'm an outsider, you know. I mean, I don't speak...
Tell by the way.
I don't speak American, I speak English, so...
I speak Texas, so I'm a kind of an outsider, too.
Right, but I mean, I suppose for me, the question that is just going round and round and round in my head is why has this problem not been sorted out decades ago? It seems to me that with 150 years worth of knowledge of mercury, all the activity, it's not like you've got one or two sites, you've got hundreds and hundreds of them all over the state. Why now? Why was this not dealt with years and years and years ago?
Right.
I mean, I don't get it. I don't get it. What's gone wrong that it's now only been dealing with now?
Great question.
No, I think that's, I do. I think that's a great question. And I think it's largely because we try to do too many things. It's not just, we don't just do mining, and we don't just do drought, and we don't just do water rights, and we don't just do drinking water, and we don't, we do many, many things. And so what we have done in the past, but we're changing this, is we've spread ourselves very thin, and we've done a little bit here, a little bit there, and you don't solve a problem like this doing a little bit. You've got to do something much bigger, and so I hope that the new direction that we're going in, where we are developing this approach to 76 reservoirs rather than one, or to lots of mines rather than just one or two, that we will actually make more of a dent in the challenge.
And I think that one of the realities is this working?
Yeah. No,
in my experience as an environmental activist now since 1979, 36 long years, it seems like issues come and go. When I was a little girl, it was all about saving the whales, and then I think it was anti-nuke, then leaking underground tanks, and then I think maybe the hole in the ozone layer was there, or the Amazon forest. Now it's global climate change. And I think it's partly this thing that Greg was talking about, it's partly the story. But I think it's also partly people finally having had enough. I think the tribal people are finally coming out and talking to us, because we're finally listening. So I think that the opportunity is here because the time is right, and because we have, the story is right. Our last speaker I'm very proud to introduce our last speaker. He's somebody that I have known for many years, a scientist who's got a very, very big view of the Sierra Nevada forestry. He was appointed the director of California's Department of Conservation by Governor Brown in January 2012. He was 25 at the time. Now you can see what the last 4 years have been done. He has dedicated his professional life to integrating sustainable production and practices. While maintaining a sensible balance between economic opportunities, environmental health, and human well-being. Prior to his position, Dr. Nekadem was a senior policy advisor at the U.S. Department of Agriculture and Forestry, served as the director of the Office of Environmental Markets, senior climate change policy advisor. One of the things that I have loved about talking with Mark since he was appointed, sounds like very, Department of Conservation, friendly, bunnies, campfires. No, they're the department that regulates fracking. They're the department that regulates mining. So this has got to be maybe the hottest seat in the state of California. But Mark has brought to this seat a huge mind and a big understanding of these challenges. So I'd like to welcome Mark Nekadem. I can't wait to hear what they're going to play for you, Mark.
Seriously.
And he's not misbehaving tonight.
No. I'm on my best behavior because this is being recorded. Well, thank you, and thank you, Izzy. Awesome, not just for putting this meeting together. We don't get to say conference because we don't get to go to conferences in the state government, but this is a meeting. It's training. And but I got to say that Izzy is kind of a force of nature in mediating. Yeah, people titter here. You know what I mean. Yeah. But I very much appreciate her ability to really kind of metaphorically and really travel from the mountains to the valley, from the capital to the provinces, as it were, to basically make sure that connections are being made. And that's what the Sierra Fund is about. It's about making connections with many, many partners, government, NGO, whatever. So I appreciate this gathering that enables people to come and have an honest conversation. I also just want to thank Izzy's incredible staff. They are really just on their toes. Thank you. And I thank all of you for your dedication and being willing to sit around. It's late, and we're going to go. But I'm, for a political appointee, going to be very brief. I think you know enough about the Department of Conservation, the Office of Mine Reclamation. Pat Paris is the assistant director there. We have people from our Abandoned Mine Lands Unit that is critically involved in the remediation of legacy mines. And that unit also is a coordinating unit. For many of you who work in this space, you know about CAMLAG. Don't ask me, it's 8 o'clock to tell you what that means, but CAMLAG is the coordinating body in California among many agencies, local government, state and federal agencies, et cetera. But those are the people who are doing the hard thinking about setting priorities among the 47,000 legacy mines in the state. That's a rough number, a statistical projection. But 47,000, no matter where you are, what you're doing, is a lot. There are 90,000 operating oil and gas wells and injectors in the state. We have on our records about 275,000 wells since 1915. So when you think about those adits and shafts, and I'm talking about 47,000 known mine sites, some of them with literally dozens, if not dozens upon dozens of features into which people fall or climb or otherwise take risk. And then there's the habitat richness of declining bat populations, et cetera. You'll all talk about this over the next couple of days. And I will be here as much as I can. I think I'm commenting on a panel tomorrow about some of the content here. But this is a very important conversation. Greg, with your opening here, your moral exhortation at the basis of your work, I think is very important for us to think about. So, I'm simply going to wrap here on a rather somewhat philosophical note and ask all of you, including myself, a question. It'll take me a little while to get there because I kind of have to frame the question, but I want to ask you a question, and I want to ask you to think about what you think your answer will be over the next couple of days at least, maybe for a while. And then my email is public. I cannot hide, so you're welcome to email to me or call Lorraine and set up a conversation because I am very interested in how you answer this question. I'm among many other things, my wayward academic training included political theory, political philosophy, political history, and I was always very dubious about history, especially in California when there really weren't any people here until we got here. There's a great book by Cat Anderson called Before the Wilderness, and it's really about the managed landscape of California that was deeply shaped by Native American practices over tens of thousands of years. And yet, to the googly, blue-eyed people who showed up from another part of the planet, this was a wilderness, untouched. One should be very skeptical about one's own thinking. However, I want to posit to you that great civilizations, if you will pardon me using that term among the left, for those of you among the left, great civilizations do at least three important things, and this is consistent throughout known human history. One is they concentrate energy and information. And in order to do that, they build infrastructure. Whatever, freeways, wires, optical fibers, great canals, whatever. And those all take lots and lots of energy, material, labor, etc. The second thing that great civilizations do is they always build monuments. Now, to the untrained eye, monuments can look like, what an ego trip. What was that about? Well, a monument, historically, and in every civilization, is essentially a physical representation of a deep and complex cultural narrative. It is the story that the people are trying to reflect about themselves. Reading monuments, whether you go to Greece and look at these old temples, you go to the Guatemalan highlands and look at the Mayan temples that are beautifully restored by University of Pennsylvania, University of Mexico, and others. You're trying to understand how they are representing themselves through story that moves a lot of rock and material, minerals, gold, etc. In fact, the very root of the name money is mona, which is a warning. A monument is a warning, not caution, it's a warning about the cultural narrative. The third thing that great civilizations do is every single one of them has a deeply ingrained narrative about intergenerational obligation, intergenerational legacy, whether it's the 7th generation or your grandchildren's grandchildren, or Carnegie building what became the public library system out of private money, philanthropic giving that is about the next generations giving back, etc. Take in mind those three things and just kind of think about them. Leaf through your own, historical training, whatever that may be. Now turn to what Izzy opened up with her comments here and look at what the civilization that is present, that we are continuing to build, which may have started with mercury, gold, and a lot of rocks downhill and downstream, and not ending up, but an interlude now in Silicon Valley. I was listening to Moore's Law on NPR on the way out here. Gordon Moore was talking about the doubling of the capacity to put transistors on silicon chips every year, and thinking, what are our monuments? We certainly concentrate energy and information. Just ask NSA. Got that, guys? NSA. All right. We also have this really complex and evolving multicultural narrative about intergenerational obligation. So when we ask ourselves about this legacy that we are very often, I don't want to anticipate your thoughts, but very often I think we look at the abandoned mines or the legacy mines and think, what a trash heap, what a terrible thing to do. I wouldn't want to justify it. I can't. I'm at the Department of Conservation. We get good money to fix those things. But I'm asking you to think about exactly what is it in the intergenerational obligation that we think we're going to do in addressing this very serious legacy that has been the building of an enormous civilization, enormous wealth. We have an agricultural economy that just at the farm gate brings in $45 billion a year, with a drought maybe 40, 38. We have a technology economy that brings in $120 billion just in state-based receipts. We have a multi-trillion-dollar California economy that relies on its natural resources base in order to produce that economy. But if we're not just about economies, we're also about information and energy, we're also about monuments, we're also about our intergenerational legacies. What are you going to do? What are your thoughts about this little gathering, one version of it, but what do you think we should be doing to think about leaving behind a legacy of giving forward or whatever it is? So fixing 47,000 abandoned mines sits for me in that broader context. And I'm asking you a very genuine question. I don't have a hidden answer. I mean, I'd be honest and tell you if I thought I knew what the answer was, but it'd be terribly arrogant of me. But I'm asking you to add that to the layers of sediment in your thinking as you move through the next couple of days. And I really, really want you to enjoy each other, enjoy the the training, and whatever it is that you'll think about in the next couple of days. Thanks very much. Aren't we talking about fracking?
If you had a magic wand, Mark, and that you had the opportunity of, let's say you were the head of the department now, what would be the first thing that you would recommend that we do to begin this new paradigm, the decision which we've been talking about here? Is this the time? Is this the place? Are we the people? What do you think? It doesn't have to be the only thing, but what's off the top of your head? What's something you think would change this acceptance of, oh, it's all okay? In my environmental movement, I've heard many people who should know better, who said things like, oh, all the mercury washed out 100 years ago. Who's got it? There's no evidence of that, but it has been considered just the truth by the environmental movement for many, many years. So if there's something you could do, magic wand?
Well, first of all, I generally think that it's always the time and we're the people. It's just what are you going to focus on? And I guess my answer is, in a word, data. I'm seeing some great work here, some great posters. I love working with Carrie Monahan. She's just, one of those people who will take a loop out of her pocket and go digging around as you're trying to get down the trail. It's, wait. And it's usually good. You're all inquirers and scientists here in one form or another. And what we too often get bogged down in, whether it's fracking or mining or whatever, is the mythologies, the stories, the narratives, and the adrenaline-pumping kinds of terms that we use that don't really have much science behind them. As you and others in the Sierra Fund have already caused to dig in, you're finding really interesting and completely unanticipated information that more and more data allows us to actually map, not just geospatially or temporally, but map conceptually exactly what's the nature of the problem we're trying to solve. Because we are incredibly skilled, especially with the amount of BTUs per person in this culture, at coming up with absolutely brilliant answers to the wrong question. So my magic wand would basically, and this is so self-serving having been a federal scientist, to magically, by orders of magnitude, increase the science budget that would allow the time and the resources to actually get the questions right. And then from there, give somebody else the magic wand.
So, Greg, what do you think the magic wand is?
Well, I don't think science is a good master. I think it's a good servant. So I would start with the question or the proposition, really. This is in my head right at the moment. We're facing the same kind of issues in the UK, but on different issues because we're a different country. Water is not something we have a shortage of because it rains all the time. For me, water should be free and clean. So if we start with that as a basic truth, it's something which falls from the sky, it's something that fills our rivers, fills our oceans, and is a commodity that shouldn't be commodified, monetized and sold, but should be a basic that we all enjoy as a building block of our basic humanity and our basic sustenance, that for me helps to frame how we pursue science in the economy. So I think we must always start with the moral value question, because to me, you get into positions like we're in at the moment with mercury and mining and gold and deforestation and toxicity and all the rest of it, because the value system has taken us to that place. And we've created a sophisticated civilization that has then turned that into a capital commodity, which we are then all have to spend money on maintaining. So to me, I would like to start to unwind that stressed clock, which is at the point of breaking, by going back to some basic fundamentals, which is water should be clean and free. And then we begin to build an economy, we begin to build a vision, we begin to build a future that allows us to facilitate that for everybody. And that will obviously precipitate structuring more sustainable economies, structuring scientific theories that support that, because all science is theory. The idea that science is an absolute, all science is built upon theoretical principles that have been deduced from evidence which is gathered. We can begin to build a common good which benefits everybody. I mean, you know, I've done a lot of work internationally with native indigenous people, whether that's in Greenland or Africa or South America. These ideas are not new ideas. They are ancient ideas which we have scrubbed out of the textbook, and we need to write them back into the textbook. And we need to get back to our human basics. That's what's in my head.
So, water, free, clean. Just thought I'd throw it to the water board. If you had a magic wand, friend.
Certainly, that's a goal. But it's very hard when you live in the Sierras, which I think many of you do, or you go to the Sierras and you encounter the streams that are there that we saw pictures of. We're a long way from getting to the ideal of clean and free. That may be the ideal. I'm not sure I would start there. I don't know. I just clean for sure. Free, I'm not so sure. I've gotten really tired of people using water because it's free and and misusing it. It's just So on that part, I'd have to think. Have to think long and hard. But I do think that if we want to get to a cleaner environment, to a clean environment, we're not going to be able to do it piecemeal. We're not going to be able to do it just through data or through science or through one project. We're going to have to pull together many different kinds of things. That's the reason I'm really quite excited about the program that's been put together on reservoirs, because we're really going to have to try a number of things that are short-term, medium-term, in order to get to the longer term, which is true cleanup. It took us a fairly long time to get here, and it's going to take us some time to get out of here and into the ideal. So I don't think we can think about. I mean, I think we can have the goal of the ideal, but I think mostly we've got to get started. And that's and I think we've got to get started together. And so I would maybe shy away from being too idealistic. Mostly I just want to roll up my sleeves and get into the water and start to do something.
pine needle?
Well, actually, I think we need to think about the fish, the native fish. We are losing a lot of our native fish in California, in Nevada, and in other states as well. And they are what sustained the native people for over 10,000 years. And so that's one of my big things. And I don't like to have people come in and tin can plant non-native fish into areas where there's native fish, because they tend to devour our native fish. That's what I've been talking to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service about.
So it's a magic fish that you'd like to wave.
Well, that's how we sustained ourselves.
Right. Well, I'd like to thank my 4 panelists for putting up with my idea that we should be doing this evening. The thing I would say is, if I had a magic wand, I would try to create this moment right now. I believe that humans are wired to work with each other. And that when we figure out how to listen to each other and not expect somebody to compromise their bottom line. I know compromise is supposed to be a good idea. I don't particularly like it. Generally, if you have to compromise your bottom line, you're not happy and you're going to keep fighting against it. When you oppress people, it turns out, here's a funny, in my view, reality. 100 years ago in Ireland, if you spoke Gaelic, you could be beaten to death. So what happened? Did the Irish give up? Did they stop speaking Gaelic? No, actually, you can turn on my radio and listen to people shouting Gaelic with heavy metal in the back and bagpipes, you know. The more you try to oppress us, the stronger we get. And so what I think we have here is the beginning. We are getting started. We're rolling up our sleeves. We're envisioning a new narrative. We're answering new questions. We're getting the science, and we're working with each other to understand it. I think, for me, the biggest triumph of this event is that it's co-sponsored by mining company, scientists, environmental organizations, community organizations, governmental organizations, tribal organizations. Everybody's at this table. We do not all agree with each other, but we're talking and we're listening. I especially want to thank the Sacramento Jazz Quartet. I mean, when I contacted these people, take us out. If you guys, where's your conductor? He said, Doc Severson. My big mistake was I didn't bring him a sparkly jacket. I did tell him I was going to get a Doc Severson jacket for him, and I forgot it. So please forgive me. We're not bringing that. And thank you, everybody, for coming tonight. They're going to take us out.